You know, the scariest thing about a mirage in the desert isn't actually the optical illusion itself.
Right, the physics of it are pretty simple.
Yeah, exactly. The heat just bends the light so the sand looks like water. But the truly terrifying part is what happens to the person who's wandering out there in that desert.
Because they're desperate.
Right. Because even if they know exactly how the optics work, if they're thirsty enough, they will still run toward it.
Oh, they'll throw themselves on the ground and literally try to drink the sand.
Yes. Because that absolute, just desperate desire for water completely overrides the logical brain. And, well, that brutal psychological truth is exactly what you're plunging into for today's deep dive. We're exploring the psychology of deception.
Which is such a fascinating topic.
It really is. Specifically, we're looking at the idea that the most successful manipulators don't win just by being clever. They win because human beings actively prefer comforting illusions over uncomfortable truths.
It's a fascinating and, frankly, a slightly unsettling lens through which to view history. And to anchor this whole discussion, we are pulling from the writings of Niccolò Machiavelli.
The ultimate strategist.
Exactly. We're going to be looking at excerpts from his most famous work, The Prince, alongside his historical account of a mass assassination known as the Senigallia Massacre. And we'll also touch on a biographical piece he wrote about a warlord named Castruccio Castracani.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to really look at those texts and investigate our own vulnerability. We want to answer a question that feels incredibly relevant today. Do deceivers and tyrants actually hijack our minds? Or do our own hopes, our fears, and our insecurities basically just hand them the keys to the front door?
That is the core of it, yes.
Because there is a line right in the introduction to our source material that sets this up perfectly. It reads, and this is a quote, "Men will not look at things as they really are, but as they wish them to be, and are ruined."
Man, that quote is it's the spine of everything we're going to discuss today. Because to understand how deception takes root, we really have to start at the genesis of human vulnerability.
Which is an ignorance, right?
Right, it doesn't begin with ignorance, it begins with dissatisfaction. It begins with this relentless, almost blind hope that things can miraculously change for the better simply because we want them to.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I know Machiavelli talks about this dynamic when it comes to people overthrowing their leaders. What's the actual mechanism there? Like, why are we so quick to buy into a new promise?
Well, Machiavelli points out in the text that people will willingly take up arms against their current ruler, genuinely believing they're going to better their situation.
They just assume the next guy has to be better.
Exactly. They get completely seduced by the illusion that whatever is new inherently means better. But he notes that they almost always realize, usually through hard experience, that they've actually just gone from bad to worse.
Right.
And he provides a very tangible, real-world example of this with King Louis XII of France.
Okay, what happened there?
So Louis occupied the city of Milan. And the citizens of Milan were so desperate for a change, just so hungry for a new golden age, that they literally threw open the gates for the invading French king.
Wait, really? So they didn't even put up a fight. They just invited an invading army in.
Exactly. They did the conqueror's work for him. But the illusion shattered almost immediately because, once the new prince was actually in charge, he had to enforce his rule.
Which means troops and taxes.
Right. He burdened them with his military, he imposed infinite new hardships, collected taxes. The people of Milan had essentially projected all of their wildest, unfulfilled desires onto this foreign king.
They treated him like a blank canvas.
Exactly. And when the messy, harsh reality of a military occupation didn't match their pristine fantasy, they felt deeply betrayed. I mean, they revolted, lost the city, took it back, and lost it again.
That is wild. It makes me think of how we behave in our own lives, when we're miserable in a situation. Say you're at a stable, maybe slightly boring job.
Yeah.
You're dissatisfied. Then this flashy new startup comes along. The founders are super charismatic. They promise you're going to change the world. They've got, beanbag chairs and ping pong tables in the office.
Oh, the classic startup dream.
Exactly. And you completely ignore all the massive glaring red flags about their business model or, their terrible financials, simply because you so desperately want the fairy tale to be true. You just need an escape hatch.
That's a perfect parallel because the psychological mechanism is identical. Hope, in this context, actually blinds us to pragmatic reality.
It's the sand looking like water again.
Precisely. When we encounter the unknown, whether it's a new leader, a new job, a new regime, we treat it as a blank slate. And because it has no sharp edges yet, we can project all of our deepest desires onto it. The people of Milan didn't look at Louis XII and see a conquering monarch with his own selfish agenda.
They just saw what they wanted to see.
Right, they just saw a reflection of their own wishful thinking.
But, okay, if human beings are walking around carrying these blank slates, essentially begging for someone to project their hopes onto, how does someone weaponize that? Like, if I'm a master manipulator, how do I exploit that massive psychological loophole?
Well, Machiavelli outlines exactly how that exploitation works when he discusses the traits a successful ruler must embody. He uses this really famous metaphor of the lion and the fox.
The lion being strength, I assume.
Right. The lion represents raw, overt power, the strength to terrify the wolves. But the fox represents craftiness and cunning. It's the ability to recognize and navigate hidden snares. You need the force of the lion to defend yourself, sure, but you absolutely need the cunning of the fox to manipulate the board.
And I imagine the fox is the one who knows exactly what we want to hear.
Precisely. And to illustrate the ultimate fox, the text brings up Pope Alexander VI. Machiavelli describes him as a man who essentially did nothing else but deceive people.
A pope who just lied all the time.
All the time. He was a serial fabricator. And yet, his deceits always succeeded. He always found willing victims.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because, and I have to push back here, I have a really hard time believing people were just that gullible.
How so?
Well, if a guy is a known serial liar, at some point, doesn't the public catch on? Like, if someone lies to you 10 times, on the 11th time, how do you not see it coming? Are we actively complying with the manipulator here?
Yes, we are actively complying. And the reason why is one of the most profound observations in the entire text. Machiavelli writes that people judge generally more by the eye than by the hand.
By the eye rather than the hand.
Right, because everyone can see what you appear to be, but very few ever come in touch with what you actually are.
Oh, wow. Okay. So appearances versus actually touching the reality of a situation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about what it means to actually touch reality. Feeling the sharp, jagged edges of a situation is harsh. Yeah, it hurts. It requires you to take action. It requires you to face your fears, and it places a really heavy burden of responsibility on your shoulders. But viewing a majestic, pious, or peaceful facade from a distance,
That's easy.
it's easy and it's safe. Pope Alexander VI understood that if he projected the appearance of mercy, faithfulness, and religion, the vast majority of people would gladly accept the visual illusion.
Just because acknowledging the truth, the terrifying reality that the person in charge might be fundamentally ruthless and self-serving, is just too psychologically devastating to process.
Yes. The text explicitly notes that people are subject to present necessities. When you are stressed, struggling, and just trying to survive your day-to-day life, you simply do not have the emotional bandwidth to tear down the very institutions that claim to be protecting you.
You just want to get through the day.
Right. You accept the mirage because acknowledging it's just sand means you have to keep wandering in the desert.
That makes so much sense on a societal level. Like, I can completely see how citizens might accept a comforting lie from a politician just to keep their worldview intact. But it's one thing to accept a lie to protect your feelings. It is a completely different level of vulnerability when accepting a lie costs you your actual life.
Oh, absolutely.
And the sources go into a historical event that proves this isn't just about naive citizens. It happens to hardened military veterans, too.
Yeah, you're referring to the Senigallia Massacre. This is where the theory turns into a chilling life-and-death reality. It centers around Cesare Borgia, who is also known as Duke Valentino.
A son of Pope Alexander VI.
Yes. And he was expanding his power across Italy, acting as basically the ultimate apex predator.
But he runs into a group of warlords who are not about to just be his prey.
Right. A group of prominent warlords, primarily from the Orsini and Vitelli families, they realize that Borgia's expansion is an existential threat to them.
If they don't stop him, he eats them.
Exactly. So they form a conspiracy. They hold a formal political summit, which the text refers to as the Diet of Magione, to coordinate their resistance. They raise armies, they start rebellions, and they actually successfully back Borgia into a corner.
Okay, so these are seasoned men who make their living through violence, strategy, and betrayal. They intimately know that Borgia is ruthless. They literally have him on the ropes. Why don't they just finish him off?
Because Borgia does exactly what a fox does. Instead of fighting a losing battle, he starts playing on their deepest psychological vulnerabilities.
He talks to them.
He opens negotiations, he offers them a treaty of reconciliation, he pays them off, confirms their old alliances, and crucially, he promises not to force them into his presence unless they choose to come.
Oh, that's clever.
Right. He feeds them the exact narrative they desperately want to hear. That they have won, that they are respected, and most importantly, that they are finally safe.
And it works. Borgia invites them to the town of Senigallia, and they actually go. Like, they leave their main armies behind to make room for Borgia's troops, and they just walk right into his camp.
It's unbelievable.
It is, but what really blows my mind in this account is the detail about one of the leaders, Vitellozzo. He apparently had a premonition that he was riding to his death.
He did. The historical account notes that when Vitellozzo left his troops, he acted as though it was a final goodbye. He rode into Senigallia on a mule, unarmed, wearing this cape lined with green, looking entirely dejected. He knew in his gut it was a trap.
Then why go?
Well, he was convinced by his ally Pagolo Orsini, who had been showered with gifts by Borgia, to trust the Duke anyway.
This is just like a character in a horror movie walking into a dark basement because they convince themselves it's just the wind. Why would a man who knows he's walking into a trap keep walking?
This raises an important question, doesn't it?
Yeah. It feels like being in an incredibly toxic relationship where one partner tells an obvious massive lie, and the other person knows it's a lie, but they accept it anyway, because calling it out means having an explosive, exhausting fight, packing up their things and upending their entire life. They choose the lie because they are just too tired to deal with the fallout of the truth.
That is a brilliant way to frame it, because living in a state of constant vigilance, always looking over your shoulder, is deeply exhausting. Did Borgia succeed merely because of his tactical genius? Or did his enemies perish because their intense underlying fatigue from constant warfare completely overrode their basic survival instincts?
I just wanted the conflict to be over.
Exactly. The Orsini and Vitelli were just tired of the hypervigilance. Borgia offered them a narrative where they could finally put their swords down and just enjoy their wealth.
So they chose the Mirage.
They did. They walked into a fortified town surrounded by Borgia's forces, and the moment they were inside a secret chamber with him, they were seized. That very night, Vitellozzo and another conspirator were strangled. The rest met the exact same fate shortly after. They didn't fall for a clever trick, they fell for their own exhaustion. They sought the story that protected them from the fear of a never-ending war, and it cost them everything.
Man. But, okay, what happens when the people being manipulated aren't just tired of war, but actively, passionately hate each other? Because it's not just the hope for a better future or the desire for peace that makes us blind, right? Our internal divisions and our tribalism seem to create the ultimate blind spot.
That brings us perfectly to the biographical account of Castruccio Castracani. He was a brilliant, utterly ruthless warlord from Lucca, and he had his eyes set on conquering the neighboring city of Pistoia.
But Pistoia had its own problems, didn't it?
Big problems. Pistoia was a city that was already consuming itself from the inside out.
It was bitterly divided into two warring factions.
Yes. The Bianchi and the Neri, the white faction and the black faction.
Like rival gangs.
Basically, yes. The head of the Bianchi was a man named Bastiano, and the head of the Neri was Jacopo. These two sides hated each other so viscerally that their entire worldview shrank down to just defeating their rival.
That was all that mattered.
Right. And Castruccio recognized this. He knew that when people are blinded by hatred, you don't even have to lie to them very hard. Both Bastiano and Jacopo secretly reached out to Castruccio asking for his military assistance to crush the other side.
Wait, I need to make sure I'm getting this right. The leaders of both warring factions independently invited the exact same foreign conqueror into their city.
Yep, both of them.
That makes absolutely no logical sense. Why would you trust a known warlord over your own neighbors?
Because tribal hatred makes us entirely myopic. Castruccio promised Bastiano that he would come in person to help him. Simultaneously, he promised Jacopo that he would send his top commander to help him.
And they both bought it.
They both implicitly believed his promises. They trusted this foreign predator more than they trusted the Florentines who were nearby, and certainly more than they trusted each other. When humans are consumed by the fear of a domestic rival, they will eagerly embrace any illusion that guarantees them victory and protection from the people they hate right next door.
So what does this all mean? It's like two people fighting over the steering wheel of a car, and they hate each other so much they decide to just drive the car off a cliff so the other person can't have it. What actually happened when Castruccio arrived?
It played out almost exactly like a tragedy. Castruccio enters Pistoia at midnight. His divided forces meet up inside the city.
Oh, no.
Yeah. One of his commanders kills Jacopo, the other kills Bastiano. They systematically wipe out the partisans of both factions, and Castruccio simply takes the city of Pistoia for himself without facing any unified resistance.
He didn't even have to breach the walls. They literally handed the keys to the city to their own executioner.
They really did. And it synthesizes everything we've been uncovering. The most effective manipulators in history don't always have to sit in a dark room inventing grand, complex lies.
They don't have to be master illusionists.
No. They simply have to observe and exploit our existing emotional blind spots. Castruccio didn't have to trick Pistoia. He just let their own animosity do all the heavy lifting.
That is the real takeaway here, isn't it? Deception is not a one-way street where a villain casts a magical spell on an innocent, unsuspecting victim. It is a terrifyingly collaborative dance.
That's a great way to put it.
Manipulators like Pope Alexander VI, Cesare Borgia, and Castruccio Castracani succeeded beyond measure because human beings actively participate in the lie. Driven by a cocktail of blind hope for the future, exhaustion from uncertainty, and a desperate need to defeat our rivals, we consciously choose comforting appearances over hard, complex realities. We want the mirage.
We essentially invite the fox into our lives, as long as the fox tells us he's only there to protect us from the wolves. The historical details change, whether we are talking about 15th century Italy or the modern day, but the psychological bedrock of why we fall for it remains flawlessly intact.
And that puts the responsibility right back on you, the listener. When you are scrolling through your news feed today, when you are listening to a charismatic leader pitch a new vision, or when you find yourself eagerly buying into a narrative that perfectly aligns with your existing grievances, you have to ask yourself a really difficult question.
A very uncomfortable one.
Yeah. Are you believing this because the empirical, touchable evidence proves it is true? Or are you believing it because your brain desperately, fundamentally wants it to be true so you can finally feel safe? Are you doing the hard work of judging by the hand, or are you just judging by the eye?
It is the hardest question to ask oneself, because answering it honestly often requires dismantling the very illusions that help get us through the day. Touching reality is never comfortable.
Which leaves us with a lingering, somewhat provocative thought to chew on. If, as Machiavelli so clearly illustrates through these sources, human beings are constantly seeking illusions of safety and deceivers always find willing victims, is our susceptibility to deception actually a feature of human evolution, rather than a bug?
Oh, well, that's an interesting angle.
Think about it. If believing in shared, comforting myths, even false ones, is what allowed fragile, ancient human tribes to stay unified, to cooperate, and to survive in a hostile world, does that mean our greatest intellectual weakness today was once the very mechanism that kept our ancestors alive?
It strongly suggests that the desire for the comforting story is hardwired deeply into our survival instinct. We are biologically built to seek the oasis, even when logic tells us it's just sand.
Even when we know it's a trick of the light, we still want to believe in the water. Keep that in mind the next time someone offers you a drink in the desert.